Hello, everyone. This is our second talk. We are going to be talking about the moon today and probably some other stuff sprinkled in there. It is January 17th, 11:21 a.m. Central Time. And yeah, we're going to talk about the moon. How's everybody doing?
Awesome.
Good. Good.
Oh,
It's been a
the
little bit of a
moon.
wild morning already.
Yeah. Um, yeah, just questions to the group. What does the moon in astrology mean to you, whether from a traditional psychological perspective, whatever way you want to take it?
I'll go ahead and start. In our pre-conversation, we were talking a little bit about moon and mother. And so my introduction to astrology was making that connection, moon and mother, because my moon is in Capricorn and my mother was a Capricorn sun. And it was always a little bit of a contentious relationship. So I just kind of made that association before I knew anything about astrology at all. Um, and these days, I suppose that the what resonates most with me is the kind of traditional Hellenistic astrological point of the moon being our most immediate environment. And to me, we extrapolate that to the body, and body being my most immediate environment. And I feel like my moon placement for me, which happens to be in Capricorn, which is the moon's exile or detriment, um, and supposedly indicates that maybe the moon is a little uncomfortable there. What I've learned that I don't necessarily feel like I am uncomfortable with emotions, with fluctuation, with the body, with having to really pay attention to my immediate environment to thrive and feel centered and feel comfortable. But I'm very structured. I'm very Saturnian in that sense that I really need. I need physical activity. I need it regularly. I have to eat regularly. I can have problems with fluctuations in blood sugar if I'm not really consistent with food intake. So I just feel like I have maybe a higher sensitivity to really paying attention to um, caring for myself in the appropriate way for whatever fluctuation is happening, you know. And then before I even started studying astrology, I really enjoyed watching my own interactions with full moons and new moons. And I found that when full moons were in certain signs, I would have difficulty sleeping, or if they were in a different sign, I might have the best, most restful night's sleep that I ever have. And so just noticing that where the moon is in the zodiac can kind of impact my just my being and not necessarily my well-being in the sense that it just normally is a great communicator to me of like, hey, you have to pay attention to this right now. And so that is one of the things that moon for me really indicates. Um, although her light is reflective and not illuminated, she's not producing her own light, she's reflecting the sun's light. I find that light to be incredibly bright, and I'm very sensitive to it, and I really notice it, and it really activates things in my being. I always love that. I don't know if you all have seen that meme that somewhere in there it's been floating around for years of somebody asking this woman if, oh, does the full moon affect you? And she's like, ah, I don't really think so, but you can just see these, lines of energy from her connecting out to the moon. And so that's kind of how I feel about the moon, that, like it's easy to sometimes think like, no, this is not so impactful. But then, our whole being is kind of pulsing with this relationship to that light, to that movement, to the way that the moon sets our rhythms.
Absolutely. Now I gotta find this meme about the moon, person with this energy emanating all out of them. I have and I want to talk right after you because I have a Capricorn moon as well. And I agree in the structure brings makes me feel more in touch with my body or my emotions or psyche, whatever you want to call it, some of those moon significations. Um, but at least for me, and I guess a therapy hour. It's a little bit more difficult for me from the moon perspective to be vulnerable and to to put my emotions out there like that. You know, emotions, that's one signification that the that could go with the moon. So that was interesting that you said that because um I guess mine's like I feel like a little different in that way. And I feel like um at least for me, that's like a way that Capricorn moon expresses itself. And that's something like I need to continue to work on. Um but yeah, generally speaking, yeah, moon, body, instincts, mother, security, comfort, um, all things that are very real and necessary for the world that we live in, right? Um, and here are like some quick thoughts that I wrote down, but in Tawa, you pretty much said most of these things, but the nature of the moon is to nourish, right? And I love this from Nightlight from Adam's class, the about how the moon reflects the world of fortune or karma. I think that's one that is paints the picture like very vividly of what like the moon does. Um, you know how the moon is Earth's natural satellite. Um, and then yeah, fortune. I thought that was um really cool when you just think about the moon. But yeah, the moon is one that I had when I first started studying astrology, I had like a difficult grasp. Like I just it was hard for me to grasp. Maybe because I have my moon in Capricorn, so it was kind of like more difficult to understand. But it just means so many things, and although like all the symbols are very versatile, um, the moon for some reason is like something that's hard to like pin down or get my hands on. And maybe because it's so fleeting, maybe because it changes phases so often. I think part of its nature is why it was more difficult for me to grasp early on in my studies.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Brett. The moon has been, um, when I first started learning astrology, those are the things you're directed to, your sun, your moon, your rising. And then we learn about the rest of the planets. And I actually found it, I said, okay, I can understand Venus, I can understand Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. They were a little bit harder, but I struggled actually with the sun and the moon and the rising. I think because they are so all encompassing, they do cover so much ground. It can be really hard to pinpoint it. Um, and mine is, excuse me, so I'm a Leo moon, and my moon is in the 12th house, and it's conjunct the sun. So, excuse me, I found that only recently have I really started to finally understand and take some of those archetypes of the moon, like memory, like embodiment, like nurturing, things like that. I as soon as I heard, okay, the moon is associated to mother, that it definitely resonated with me. Both my mom and dad are have been very distinct features of my life and continue to do so. And so, what's really interesting, you talk about the reflection that the moon itself is not producing any light, but a reflection of the sun. And my moon being at 14 degrees Leo and my sun being at 18 degrees, there is always this feeling of them just flashing back at each other. So I get the sun flashing and the moon reflecting back. And there is a video I saw the other day of this little train of light that was going through like a glass sculpture of shards of glass. And every time the little light just turned a corner and it hit a shard of glass, it would just, this light would just like flash everywhere. And I thought, well, that really kind of reminds me of how the moon and sun kind of come together. They're constantly, at least in my chart, they're flashing together in the 12th, which is like this vast space. Um, but I found that one of the things in terms of embodiment that I've really come to terms with is I recognize, and this is, I guess, a synthesis with the 12th, which is the joy of Saturn, which being a Capricorn moons, you can kind of see where the coldness and maybe some of the ta detachment can come in, is that I recognize that I can dissociate from my body quite easily and not
Mm.
notice things like pain, things like temperature change, and and also because of other factors like where my Mercury is, if you're always in your brain, then your body is just, you're just like pulling your body along and you're asking it to do things that it doesn't want to do. And then I feel like the moon comes in and says, okay, you weren't listening. I was giving you all the signals, so I'm going to now change it and I'm going to make it really obvious for you. Um, so I do think it's something it's interesting is that when your moon is in a place where it can disconnect, it will disconnect. And you do have
Mm.
to make that effort in order to find that connection. Being a Leo moon, then again, this is just an epiphany, and I thank you guys for making me do this, is that one of the things I do recognize is um, art making, the practice of art making is extremely embodied. So about a year ago, I finally took my first pottery class, which I've wanted to do for years. And talk about the embodiment of that is in all kinds of ways, is that you're sitting in this front of this ball of clay that's spinning incredibly fast and will hit you and it'll hit the person beside you if you do not maintain some control over it. And yet at the same time, you also can't have so much control that you don't let it do its thing. And so, the interesting thing about art practice and being a Leo is that, like, I always feel like you can find healing in just getting your hands in the dirt, getting your hands in the clay, putting a paintbrush in your hand. So, feeling that big stroke. And I remember my first year of university, I was at my painting class, and my instructor, my teacher said to me, she goes, "Oh, you're being so precise and so perfect." I mean, a Virgo rising, you're trying to make sure everything is perfect. And she's like, "You got to just let it go. Just let it go." And I thought, okay. And it was awkward. It was awkward to just feel it. But then once you did, and you got to feel how that paint flowed on the canvas and just moving things around, the tactile nature of art is really, I think, where I feel like my Leo moon comes through quite strongly, as I just love that feeling. Just um, the senses being like touching things. And so when I was teaching, I remember my students say, I don't want to touch the clay. It's cold and it's mucky. And like, get your hands in there. Just get in there and just feel it. And then on the flip side, when you get to a point where if you're not doing so well, if you're mentally not in a good space, if you're having, issues with your memories, things like that, that can also disconnect you from your body. And I went through a phase where um, I would go into the shower and I would turn the heat up way, way super high, and I would never feel that heat. I still couldn't feel my body just felt so cold. And again, it did not occur to me until learning astrology that, well, my Leo moon is in the 12th house. It's in a place of deep, deep coldness. And there's other parts to my chart that add to it, but you can pull away and not feel actual be tactile. So um, that's how I think I would say one of the things that I've noticed with my Leo moon.
I have a question. So when you're talking about like your yeah, Leo moon, is it like there's a sense of comfort, there's a sense of being in tune with your instincts when you're creating, when you're performing in some type of way? Is that like, would you say like that's like somewhat of the manifestation of a Leo moon?
Interesting that you say that. And so I would say the creation aspect, I'm in that zone when it's quiet and I am
You're in the flow state,
creating.
yeah.
Now, you also said performance,
Hmm.
which is Leo. No, because mine is in the
Mm.
12th.
Okay.
So that is where, I mean, being in the 12th, put me in like a nice quiet art studio, give me my music, give me a little couple of
Yeah.
snacks, give me all the treat, all the equipment I need, and go. And I am happy as a clam. So, but to perform it, um, I have to push myself, and I do enjoy it, but it takes a lot to push myself to do that performance aspect.
It
Yeah.
it makes me wonder. I think it's a really interesting question, and I don't have my moon in Leo, but I have my sun in Leo. And it makes me wonder whether we as humans have maybe misinterpreted this idea of performance because I don't relate to performance at all either, even having a Leo sun. But I very much relate to creating and producing and, like being really involved in something to create something beautiful. And sometimes that maybe that is what performance is. It's not so much that we perform for an audience, it's that we
Yeah.
perform this creative function or we perform, um, whatever it is we're trying to build. Uh,
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'll share that, one of the things is, I was an art teacher and there was a phase where I think when you grow up studying, you study arts in a certain way, everybody thinks, oh, you're going to be an artist and you can do all this stuff and you can, whatever, you can produce all these things. And I got so focused on the production aspect, it negated that joyous feeling. Um, it took me a very, very, very long time to realize that yeah, just sit and like I would have sketchbooks upon sketchbooks that were empty and art supplies that were brand new and in the packaging because I was too afraid to use it. Got to save it for like a good project or a really, a worthy project. And finally, it was a few years ago, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I got all these amazing supplies here, and I'm not using them." And you still get, and even there's still today, I sit down, I'm like, who's going to look at this? Well, who the fuck, excuse me, it doesn't matter who looks at it. Um, it doesn't matter who looks at it if nobody sees it. If I just like to paint because my brain engaged with my hand and as it moved the watercolor over the paper and I had that moment of euphoria, that's all that matters. But, you're hard nut to crack sometimes. And so it's hard to get over the idea of production and showing and performing because there is that expectation that, oh, you're creating something. Oh, let's see it. I'm like, well, maybe it wasn't to be seen,
Right.
right? So I am trying to embrace this moment now because it's also that's that fear of failure is I'm trying to embrace it that if I, sit down and paint, it doesn't matter if it's going to be seen. It doesn't matter if it's going to go anywhere. Um, it doesn't matter if just doesn't matter. Just paint. Who cares? But I struggle with it. It's an ongoing struggle. So yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting how, and your moon is in Leo in your 12th, right? You said. So
Yeah.
it's just so interesting how that it's like that extra layer, that 12th house, like where am I in this level of is this performance or like,
Yeah.
oh, should I do that? And coming back and forth, you can really see that like that struggle, like having it in that particular house. And it's
Yeah.
interesting how it's like hearing you talk about how it expresses itself, how that moon, how your need for embodiment and creativity like expresses itself through that 12th house, like is really that that's really cool. And to hear Tawa and Brett, you talk about how like your moons, like and how that plays out for you. Like it's more like the need for structure, like what do we need to nourish ourselves? Like Natasha, you're saying like I need this creativity, but I like struggle with the ability, or struggle with like the where that with that 12th house piece, bringing it to the forefront or like, and then Brett and Tawa just talking about that moon in Capricorn, like Saturn ruled, like needing it to be structured and like, do I want to get close to the emotion? Like things like that. Like what feels safe and what feels like like home to you as far as, yeah. And I think that's what, like, for me, that's what the moon means to me. It's that, like, I really relate to that yin, that inward embodiment, like feminine mother nourishment kind of feel. And I also think of like the theme of Moon Day when I think it will never like never stop surprising me or like fascinating me that it begins like the inception of the theme of like the chart begins with the moon. And that's
Mm.
where we come in, like kind of like through the mother, that's our embodiment. So it's really cool.
Hmm.
It's awesome that you brought that up because that's what it is, right? It's like Cancer is the beginning in the
Hmm.
world chart.
Yeah, in the theme of Moon Day, the theme of the moon. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that both Tawa and Brett, so you think about it, your moon is in that opposite place from, is it the gate of man, right? You guys are in the gate of the gods, right? Your moon, your placement there. So it's interesting that it's in that opposite place, which is why it probably doesn't want to get, opposite from Cancer in this place of, really indulging in that nurturing. You're like, we don't have to nurture completely, but we can hold the space. And I think that's at like that at most like or at the minimum, sorry, that the moon can do that, right? We look at sometimes as planets being in their fall or in their exile as, people are like, oh my goodness, this is what my moon is. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it can't do its job. It just holds it differently, right? It has a
A-
different perspective.
Absolutely. And to add to that, it's like Cancer in the northern hemisphere is like things grow better like during that summertime, like things are more fertile where the moon in Capricorn when it's in the northern hemisphere when it's colder, it's harsher. Um the moon is naturally going to act different because it has to it's I don't want to say it's like it's more about surviving, but it's definitely a harsher environment for the moon to be in. And I think that's
Mhm.
reflective of the need for structure, the need to have everything in organized spaces so that it can still grow, so that it can still do its thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
seeing
And
that Saturn expressing through the moon, like
Yeah.
we need to preserve, we need to like have all of our have everything, in order so that we can survive this.
And it's
Yeah.
also
And
it's interesting, sorry, it's interesting how it also corresponds, in the Northern Hemisphere, it corresponds with this kind of idea that we have of needing to go inward in the winter, because we're just
mm,
getting quieter and going inward and becoming more contemplative. Well, Capricorn moon really does that. Like it needs to be a little more inward and contemplative. Yet it's Capricorn, so it also needs to have some outlet for expressing its energy and all of its potency because it has a lot of that. Um, and then for me, it's interesting because, for everybody, Capricorn and Cancer, there's that axis, but my ascendant is Cancer. And so and they're within a degree of each other in opposition. So it's almost an
Mm.
exact opposition between my moon and my ascendant. And
oh
Mm.
so
wow.
I find this interesting kind of push-pull between the
Mm.
very Cancerian, the lunar Cancer aspect of me that is super nourishing and super available to others, and then the Capricorn um, Saturnian energy that is involved with my moon, and that need to be far more introspective and to have a lot of actual limits and boundaries and kind of establish like what I truly am willing and able within, a desire to stay healthy myself, how much I can indulge my nourishing tendencies in Cancer.
Mhm.
So it's kind of an interesting, push pull that I feel like I experience a lot of.
Yeah, I think
It's
it's
funny because
interesting.
it's go ahead, Rhiannon.
I was just gonna say it's interesting how the moon, and Natasha, I almost wonder if you were gonna say the same thing. But like it's interesting how the moon, like, and that like the fact that it is nourishing, and like when we see where the moon connects to other aspects in our charts, we can see like how we take care of ourselves, like what is our need for taking care of ourselves, like for Tawa, with it being in your ascendant, and like, like how that maps out. I think for me, I look at it as mine is square my moon, and or square my Mars in Leo. So like for me, it's like health is like a top priority. Like I have to always be on that since I was like 16 years old. It was never an option. So yeah. What were you gonna say, Natasha?
Oh no, no, it's funny, and you were saying it doesn't feel like an option. So there's always that. I was listening when I was listening to Dana and Whitney talking in the Weekend Wisdom, and they're talking about the moon being a thread, right? Like it weaves, right? Because it keeps moving, then it weaves from one planet to the other. And so I feel like that's that thread that's always just pulling for you a little bit. Like it doesn't, like
Mhm.
you said, like there's no choice, which I think is really interesting because about when I just have my reflection of how I'm engaged with my body, and you feel like with yours, like there's no choice. I have no choice. I have to do this, right? Because
Mhm.
we can't, maybe I'm speaking for myself, not always treating my body with the nicest, with the most nourishing approach I could be, right? And so, but if you are always feeling that pull, then you're like, okay, you're more actively engaged and you sense it better, right? Being a Taurus moon, you're going to sense and feel it better. Um, and actually, it's funny what I was thinking about with Tala was what came to mind was I was thinking of like a pioneer woman, or I was thinking about Little House on the Prairie. And one of the images that kind of came to mind was the mothers in that time during the winter time. They hold so much strength and nurturing simultaneously in the cold of winter. And, they're keeping the fire going. They're making sure everybody's got their warm protective gear. They are managing the hearth and the nurturance of the home during the toughest winters in the north, or the toughest seasons in the north, right? From a northern perspective. And I just think about like a Capricorn moon reminds me of a woman like that, like of a person like that who is keeping keeping living going and keeping like the fire going and the idea of humanity going through those darker months. They sustain it, right? And I think you need that. You need a Capricorn moon to do that because you need somebody. And it's funny, Tawa, yours being that across your first and seventh axis, you yourself are feeling that need of, you know, to be nurturing. And then when you look to the seventh for how you nurture other people, well, now you come with a more structured approach and say, okay, I know you're going to need this, but this is how I think you should do it in this more structured way. And it's going to support them because it's coming from a place of nurturance, right? It's not coming from a place of ego, I think, necessarily. But that's what I was just thinking of. So I was picturing this woman in this like cabin in the middle of winter with nothing else around and her kids and um, maybe a husband, but it's not to say if he was there or not there, but I'm just picturing her taking care and tending to the fire and keeping the stove going, which that's also a difficult thing during that time is to keep a stove going and lit and having the warmth going through the house. So
It's
yeah.
almost like y'all know the game The Oregon Trail.
It's totally thinking of that. Yes. I
No.
was born in the
That's like
80s.
one of the first thing that was one of the first things that popped into my head. Just like the survival aspect and keeping everybody comfortable when shit is just hitting the fan and things are just going crazy. Excuse my
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
It's funny though, as you were describing this idea that you're conjuring, Natasha. So that was actually exactly my experience with my mother as a small child,
Oh yeah.
because I grew up without running water and like, heat with a switch. So it was all wood heat.
Mm,
And I can remember my mom in the morning, like she'd get up really early, start the fire. She would, if it was a school day and I had to get out of bed at a certain point, she would, ask me which clothes I wanted and put them under my blankets with me so I could warm them up and get changed into them
Oh,
before I got out of the bed. And then that by then the house would be a little bit warmer and stuff. So it was just
That's
interesting to have
awesome.
you like describe this situation that was just my actual childhood experience. Now she's not my mother was not a Capricorn moon, she was a Capricorn sun, and she was a Scorpio moon, which is interesting because of
Mm.
course the moon is in her fall in Scorpio. And so the moon struggles in Scorpio. And so, it's interesting to watch how my mother had this deep nurturing value. And she really, she was that person who kept the fire going, who put food on the table, who made sure all these things happened. Um, yeah, where she struggled, I think, and that may have been indicative of her Scorpio moon, was emotional availability and emotional kind of intelligence, for lack of a better way of putting it. But she really, because she was intensely sensitive, her response to being intensely sensitive was to kind of shut it down and become a very just practical, live on the earth with the daily steps that you need to do, and kind of avoid any real strong emotional digesting or interpreting or integrating of her emotional experiences. So that's interesting, and I'm curious with you, Rhiannon, because I know that you have a Taurus moon, which is of course where the moon is exalted. And so you could see if you have any ideas about what, that contrast of a fallen moon, where maybe you struggle, and I would say my mom struggled probably with her immediate environment as far as body, and she struggled with health more than ever. Her thing that she liked to say is, "Oh, it's all mechanical." But mechanical kind of matters. Like eventually when it's all mechanical, then you get to a point where you can't be fixed anymore.
yeah,
So I'm curious as to what that opposite thing can be, because we think of exaltation as maybe being easier, but what I have seen with people's placements and planets being exalted is that sometimes um it's maybe a little too exuberant or a little too lavish or a little too indulgent or something, you know what I mean? Like it gets
Okay.
it gets farther in that direction than maybe you would want, so I guess what,
yeah,
what I'm saying is it's equally challenging to balance it in your life and in who you are and how you're working in the world. But maybe the challenge isn't that you have to kind of bring yourself up from this depressed or retracted place, but you have to pull yourself in from a slightly too expansive or exuberant space. But that's just kind of how I have seen, exalted versus fallen planets to work in
yeah.
parts.
I think for me, like having my moon in Taurus, like exalted, and then it's also in the third house, like of my like daily, like daily living environment. But for me, like it's just I just feel like I feel everything. Like I
Mhm.
feel it before it even becomes an intellectual conversation in my mind. Like, and I haven't always sorted it out by then. And it's actually like if I don't take the time to do that, like I can just like all I'm doing is feeling, and it's actually I don't know, for me that sometimes is a little bit frustrating because like, I you our minds just naturally, and maybe because I'm a Libra sun and you know like I want to intellectualize it to some extent and understand it, um, what's going on, and it's just not always readily available to me. But as far as feeling that stuff, like it's very easy for me to do, um, like feeling other people's feelings without with when they don't even know what they are, and that's like, it's interesting because yeah, that I'm more at home in that area and I can do that type of thing. But Like it just creates a whole nother level, like you were saying, Tao, of like need for boundaries or need for like, understanding like what's actually going on in there. So yeah, I definitely like I think like if I were to like classify myself in some way, I've always been like, oh, I'm a feeler. Like that person's a feeler. Like they know. Like they can feel all the feelings. So yeah. And I think too, with that being like the square that I have to Mars, I think for me, like the way that expresses itself is I've never in my life gone without doing something physical. I was working out. I was lifting weights at like as a teenager. Like I was always into something, doing some kind of yoga, like trying to, I was a rock climber for a while. Like I would go into these like 5 year periods of doing like just really exploring some kind of like thing where I did it like like all the time, like ever showed up weekly for it for years. And that brought me back into my body. And that really, would help me. That was a point of nourishment for me. So I think it's yeah, Taurus moon exalted, like it's at home in its space. It feels its feelings, but it also comes with, whatever challenges you see in your chart with aspects that are, influencing it. So
Can
Well,
I
that is,
ask?
sorry,
Sorry,
go
go.
ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, and Tara, maybe you want to speak before anybody answers, but I wanted to ask what everybody's moon phase was,
Yeah.
and if they've thought about how that's factored in to their perception of the moon.
I think I will actually talk, because we can
Yeah.
close that out then. I just was having the thought that if, you talking about the fact that you're really being in your body is so important to how you balance your emotions and stuff. And that's very Taurian too, that's very like Moon in Taurus, right? Taurus is just so here now on earth in the body,
mhm.
experiencing everything, so to me it makes sense that that's where you find um it's your best tool in the toolbox to deal with the fact that you feel everything,
Yeah.
you know so
I just want to say this real fast. Rock climbing sounds very Moon and Taurus.
Really? That's
Yes,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Very
great.
Moon and Taurus square Leo.
Yeah.
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 Mars and Leo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Moon phases. Okay, I'll start it off, I guess. Is that what you're asking, Natasha?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a full moon in my chart. So my moon is opposite my sun in Cancer. How does that show up? Just like any other opposition, tension. Um, like like working with the tension, like not leaning too heavily on one side or whatever it may be. Um, so my moon is in the fifth house in Capricorn, then my sun's in the 11th. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting placement, I think. Not that it's special by any means, but I think any opposition tends to be very present in whomever's life, especially when it comes to the luminaries, right? And I think it was I think Tawa, you're talking about this about like how um because your moon or you're a Cancer rising, and then the moon is in the seventh,
Yeah,
or
so that's that's an opposition by 1 degree off,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So just that like that oppositional, is that a word? Oppositional.
Mhm.
I'll just be making up words sometimes, I
You
swear.
go right ahead.
That's
We all
okay.
do.
But yeah, just tension, and I think Adam explained it pretty well, and it helped me understand my chart a little bit better, or just even astrology of just like moon being like your environment, and then the sun being like plot line. It's like the tension between the two. So working, that's been something I'm going to have to continue to work on throughout my life, um, based off of how it's like reflected in my chart.
I can go next. So I have a balsamic moon, and it's funny is that I've uh as you know, as you get to learn your astrology and you hear these things like detriment and fall and bad house and evil spirit and all those things,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, yeah, like this is great. But and so like balsamic moon, I know a good friend of ours described it as and it makes me laugh every time she says it. It's like pulling really tight jeans off. It's like terrible to do. And it makes me it makes me laugh, but I'm like, and she's like, you're perpetually just stuck. You're at that like last part when it's stuck around your ankles, and you're like, I can just get it off, but it's just not there yet. I'm like, maybe this sounds about right. But one of the things I think about is just even um I used to say things like I do things at the 11th hour, and which always makes me laugh because it's a very balsamic moon thing, and also in the 12th house, so I love it. My procrastination is I feel like I've welcomed it in a different way. Also, just like I think being like a big napper, that's shifted and
Hmm.
changed over my years. But between like certain hours of the day and the afternoon, um, I can feel where I can have a much deeper and restful and a sleep full of dreams in the afternoon sometimes. So I think that balsamic moon kind of comes up in places. Um, and this is actually a quick funny story about a balsamic moon in the 12th is I have this thing where people don't see me, even though I'm in the room, which is really funny because it's been happening at home and with my coworkers. And so it's become a joke. They're like, where did you come from? I'm like, I've been here the whole time, sitting right over there. But because I'm sitting behind like a pillar, they walk into the room and I just right behind that pillar. They're there for 5 minutes and then they're like, where'd you come from? I never saw you. So now I laugh at it because it's like a physical thing. I'm like, oh, they can't see me. I'm just gonna kind of come in and out, and that's my balsamic moon. Can't see me. It's too dark.
That's funny. It's fun. I haven't looked too deeply into it myself, but I know I have a balsamic moon as well. So it's so funny that you
Yeah.
say doing everything at the 11th hour because I do my best work by the seat of my pants. Like it's just
Yep.
not, yeah. It's like I need that like stress to make me to make
Yeah.
me go. But when
Yeah.
I have that, I'm like I'll everything will get done. Like it
Right.
will happen. Yeah. It's just it's kind of I mean, I definitely see that expressed through. And mine is just coming off the opposition. So, like, because my sun is in Libra and the moon is in Taurus. So it was like just passing Aries and going into Taurus. Oh, it's like almost at the end of Taurus, actually. It's like 26 degrees. But yeah, I definitely, I almost feel, depending like what phase that is, it's like, yeah.
But yeah, it's like the genius comes out of that moment. You can try to fight the procrastination too, and sometimes it works really well, but other times it's
Mhm.
just like the this moment of there's just something brilliant that will come out all of a sudden just in those last moments. You could be
Mhm.
working on it for a and it just doesn't come, but that last moment something comes up. You're like, oh, now I have 5 minutes to get this done. Okay,
Yeah.
but it'll get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at progress charts too, recently, and I just thought that's kind of interesting to think of like where like like how the moon phases changes in your progress chart. Because I feel like as it came more into like a conjunction with my sun in my progress chart, I was like, oh, I'm like, I just feel like now I'm getting everything done. Like I'm like I don't I like that procrastination kind of like disappeared a bit, but maybe a
Yeah,
talk for another time.
Interesting.
definitely.
My moon is a first quarter moon, and then it was a full moon eclipse 2 days after I was born. So it's at the very end of that first quarter moon. Which as you were talking about this balsamic moon and the procrastination and your best work, and so just through that framework, which I'd never really thought about it in that framework. I am actually, I mean, I can relate to the idea of doing pretty good work at last minute, but I also much prefer giving myself some time and having, uh, although it's different because as a student, I hated take home exams because my best thinking was just right in that moment of reading an essay question and just like whatever came up in that moment was always a better answer than being able to mull it over for a long time. But other things I really, it's almost like I'm reflecting that couple of days before something really, blossoms and it comes to fruition that's my most productive time. Um, and so, as far as how that I haven't looked a ton at, what that, end of the first quarter moon means in my life. It'll be interesting for me to start contemplating now a little bit more as to how that shows up for me. But I do feel like I'm a very good, that people will talk about, like I'm a great initiator, but then I don't have a whole lot of follow through, or I'm a great this or that, and I'm a really good, finisher or complete, I'm good at like taking something and making it actually, fully happen. Um, so maybe that's a reflection of being in first quarter moon right before the moon.
Mhm. I think it's funny too, because I was thinking both Tala and Brett, you guys are both cardinal signs. So that initiation, that starting and Tala, you so beautifully just explained that, you get that essay question, you're like, oh, the idea like comes to you and you can kind of sit and stew on it. And if I remember, that first quarter moon is that like that act of initiation, that push forward, whereas Rihanna and I are both fixed signs in balsamic vein.
Yeah.
Like,
That's why we're
oh, we're
like,
the
we will
end.
do it. We'll get it done when we want to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna let it sit and marinate for a really
Yeah.
long time before it's ready. Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
The moon is sorry, I was on mute for a little bit. The Mune, that's the Mune. I just made up a new planet.
There you go.
The Mune, there's a new planet. No, the moon, I think why it was so difficult for me to grasp is because um how it's such an integral part of astrology and the flow of everything on Earth. We did this last time and I wanted to do it again, just like some moon facts.
Mhm.
So like how Earth's natural satellite, the moon, is the nearest celestial body to Earth and the most familiar object to the night sky. And I thought this was really cool. Um, though radically different distances apart from us on Earth, they appear to be the same size to our eyes, and they even eclipse one another. And that was from nightlight. Um, I just think that's so fascinating that the sun is like way, way, way bigger, but just how things are perfectly placed. Um, the moon looks the exact same size, and they even eclipse each other sometimes, right? Um, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Despite its apparent glow, the moon generates no light of its own. Instead, its surface reflects sunlight. And then the gravitational pull of the moon causes Earth's oceans to bulge, creating high tide. So just the just how the moon's literally um, affects us on Earth, like like even from like a material perspective. I think that speaks volumes to like the symbolic nature of like what the moon is, of how like real it is to us and the formation of things.
I think it's interesting, Brett, that we come back around to this because we were talking about that meme of the woman who the moon,
I
impacts.
gotta find this meme. I gotta
Yeah,
find this
Mhm.
meme.
I have it somewhere,
You can
so
put
I
it
will
on the
share
Please
it with
send
Instagram.
it.
everybody at some point.
Yeah.
Please.
Do share.
But anyway, when you were talking about the fact that the moon impacts the oceans and the waters on Earth, and then I always think about it, and I forget the percentage of our human body that is water, but it's a very high percentage. And so I've always felt like the moon is, you know, either quieting or activating or creating waves or creating, a lull in the tide internally in our physical being every time that she's doing what she does. And so, she's a highly impactful planet, moon,
Mm.
being, whatever it is that she is classified as, a luminary.
Embodied.
And
Oh, what were you gonna say? My bad.
oh no,
No,
no, no. It, um, right, where you're gonna go?
Okay, okay, okay. No, no. When I first started studying astrology, I was like hell bent on how causal it could be because of things like the moon and how it literally affects us, right? And as the more I studied, my perception and philosophy has changed drastically. I'm not saying that there are this may be sacrilegious, but that it may not be that everything may not be caused, but I feel like there's something in there that we don't understand. I personally feel that has some causal components to it. Do I feel like astrology is divinatory in nature? Absolutely. Like that's one of the things that I'm thankful for studying with Adam and studying with y'all, um, all the Nightlight crew, for opening my eyes and my heart, to that. But there's something so interesting about the moon that we just, and even some of the other planets that we just don't know about. And so I always like to keep like a little window open somewhere of like, oh, this could be possible too, you know? And I may be talking out of two sides of my mouth, but but no, that's truly how I feel. I understand the divinatory nature of it, and I've grown to, but I also, I mean, we like you literally look outside and see how the moon affects us. You literally see outside and how the sun affects us. Like to me, there has to be something to that as well.
Like
well,
some
it's
kind of
like,
order and structure.
I'm sorry.
Like some kind of order and structure to that whole.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, like,
yeah.
yeah, like there's a blueprint.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and
It
even,
is.
I mean, I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
How many times do we hear people talk about being solar powered, right? So just as we're talking about how the moon impacts the movements of the waters and humans and on Earth, there's also that solar thing that, people have seasonal affective disorder. And,
Mhm.
so obviously, beyond the very, you know, tangible of the sun can be too hot and create issues there, or too not present enough and create issues there, so obviously there's this deep divine order might be a great word for it, Rhiannon, of just the workings of the cosmos.
Yeah, and when you
I
start
love
to
that.
see it, it's one of those things is like it really is a mystery. I think it's probably the most mysterious, and yet it's the closest to us. It's the most accessible, and yet it's still the most mysterious. And I found
Mm,
that taking like last year, I'd hear people say, "Oh, follow the moon, in the calendar, and check to see if it's a new moon now." And I thought, "Oh yeah, I can do this." No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't track. I couldn't keep with it. Just that's just not the way my brain works. But I was still trying to understand. Okay, well, there is this earthly connection, and like you said, it is so mysterious. And like we look at things like, obviously women's menstruation cycle. I mean, that right there, the fact that it can affect our bodies in this way is telling you that there is some cause and
Mhm.
effect there, right? And like the tides and things like that. But, still I found for myself to process and be able to connect with the moon if I couldn't connect by tracking or, going with the phases is to see where it shows up in other places. And Michelle Corbessier had mentioned in a workshop, Michelle Corbessier, who's amazing from Michelle's Midheaven, she talked about even just the simple relationship of the moon, the phases of the moon relating to your breath. And ever
mm.
since she said that, I just absolutely love it because then when I forget, I go back to breath. So the, that new moon is at the base of that breath. And then when you take that deep breath, that is your waxing, your waxing moon up until your full moon, which is that full breath, right? And then as you release, it is the waning moon phase. And I just thought so amazing to watch that. And I was also feeling very silly when I was gardening one day and I'm looking at all the flowers and I'm looking at the seeds and I'm looking at the stages of the growth and I'm realizing, oh, those are the phases of the moon. Like that we don't just, it's right there in front of us that we're seeing this new moon of the seed. We don't see the seed, it's underground. It's doing its thing, but it's getting ready to burst forth off from the ground. And then it just keeps pushing forward towards the light. And then at that bloom, then you get like that full moon, you get the bloom of the flower or the fruit that you can harvest, right? And then from there, you can share and disseminate, and then you have that waning moon. So I find that sometimes the mystery of it is just trying to really find where it exists on Earth in front of us. For me, sometimes I need it to be so literal in front of me, like, oh, those are the phases of the moon. I could see it playing out.
That's really cool. I like how you like made reference to like the elusive, the subconscious, the like the moon, that nourishment is underground, and then it does like burst forth as like the patterning of the cycles. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I feel like we covered a bunch of stuff on the moon today.
Yeah.
I love how we just like all yeah, we just all just talked about the moon from our perspectives because I think that helps really paint the picture for whomever's watching. And then hopefully some of these things can resonate with them, you know. Does
Mhm.
anybody else have anything to say about the moon or uh what we've been talking about today?
Feels
The new moon tomorrow.
it is a new one tomorrow.
New moon
Yes.
in Cap,
Yes.
And Venus
new
just
moon in
moved into
Capricorn.
Aquarius, so
And we are
things,
in a balsamic phase right now. It's a dark moon right now.
yeah.
So
So,
the balsamic phase is like is it like the very last part
yeah,
before
the new
Yeah.
moon. Yeah.
that's interesting
So,
from a
Mhm.
symbolic perspective.
Mhm. The
right.
closing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Releasing everything until it becomes new again, right? So
Mhm.
that very, very last, that's that taking off the jeans, rest stuck on your ankle.
On that image,
Yeah.
we feel complete.
Thank you, Dee Dee. Yeah.
No, yeah, appreciate everybody. Anybody have anything else to say?
No, thank
All
you,
good. Whoever's
everyone.
watching this, like, subscribe. I'm just kidding. No, no, appreciate everybody. If you have anything that yeah, comments would be appreciated. Just being able to interact with us. I think that would be fun. And yeah, we'll be back next time.
Right.
All right.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
appreciate everybody.
Right.
Thank you.